After a controversial ending to the Brazilian Grand Prix, it looks like Max Verstappen's reason that he gave during his radio might be related to a Monaco incident during qualifying. We have news that Mattia Binnotto might be getting sacked, and we are getting the announcement on who's going to be the other driver for Haas next year. Let's get right into it, folks. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Formula One Digest. I'm your host, Tyson De Silva. I'm joined by my co-host, Mark. Mark, the Brazilian Grand Prix was pretty epic, an epic weekend all around. We saw a first pole, a first win, and we also saw some drama between teammates, most notably between Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. Mark, it has come out that Max Verstappen's real reason behind not letting Checo pass was due to the Monaco qualifying incident where Checo crashed in Q3, preventing Max from doing another lap, which might have surpassed him in the grid order. Of course, at the time, both of them were fighting for the championship. Do you think this has any sort of valid reasoning behind it? Do you think that this is a true fact?
Well, I mean, I've seen some videos. I've rewatched Q3 uh, on boards with Checo at Monaco, and I believe that there could be some merit to Max's reasoning. Although it's never a good thing to not play the team game, especially, well, I mean, in team sports in general, you always want to be supporting the team. You always want to be putting the team ahead of your own uh, personal uh, uh, personal ideologies. And Max just didn't really play that game on Sunday. Uh, but I think there's some credibility to what Max did. But should he have done that on track, or could he have done it a different way? Yeah, he definitely could have. Does this cause a little bit of a rift between the two Red Bull drivers now? I know Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber have had their scuffles, most notably in Multi 21. Uh, and that was what my mind went to first when I saw this live happening when I was watching the race. And I was just like, wow, I mean, Red Bull has dealt with this before. It's not a new thing. And it just surprised me that it happened so late in the season. I can understand it earlier in the season, but Max had already won the championship. So, I mean, he could have given Checo that, and he definitely should have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that what kind of hurts is just the timing of everything. You have your teammate, a guy who's supposed to be your friend, who is fighting for P2 in the championship, which is probably the highest he's ever going to be in his career. And you know, you really kind of put an emphasis on the fact that you're putting your foot down and not playing the team game because he's put Checo in a position now where he has to finish ahead of Charles. There's no combination or anything to it. It's basically a redo of last year in Abu Dhabi where it's whoever comes ahead of the other. So, in my opinion, like, yes, you should address that, especially if you think that there are issues within the team, but I just don't think that's the right way to go about it. He recently Max was also made the GEQ Sports Athlete of the Year in like the Man of the Year like edition or whatever, and I just think
Wow.
it just all comes at like a weird time because it's like, hey, this is the same guy who just denied his teammate a 2 point lead in the championship. And it's not that like it's not and even though it's not for the first place position, it's still of some material because come on, like you're supposed to play a team game at this point. You've won the championship. Your team has won the championship. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Uh, Even though you're driving two different cars in Formula One, you still have to be a team player. And where it's so close in the championship, I mean, I think he could have thought through it a little better.
Yep. No, 100%. And I think that um, Christian is definitely going to have a talk and make sure that all the priorities are set going into this race weekend because, if you really want that 1-2, you have the better car. You are in the position where you can win this, and especially on that long straight in the Abu Dhabi circuit, you can get massive time there, but you really need to make sure that Max has his priority straight, and the priority is to get Checo P2 in the championship, wrap up the year, and then be done with it. Forget about everything, and look to the future.
Exactly.
Yep. And so, I think it's going to be really fun to see, obviously, Charles versus Checo. It's not the same epic duel or clash that we thought we were going to get this year. Max was just a dominant force, but you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing how both teams will approach it. And speaking of Charles and Ferrari, there is some news that has broken out a couple of hours ago regarding Mattia Binnotto. And it looks as though, Mark, he's going to be getting the can and being replaced by Fred Vassueur, who is the team principal for Alfa Romeo. Mark, what does this send a message to the F1 paddock that Ferrari is looking for a change and wants to be the real deal next season?
Absolutely. And I think uh, Mr. Vasser is the best choice right now for the team. With Audi coming in, Sauber has been Frederick Vasser's baby for these last few years. He's basically nursed them back to health. He's gotten their wind tunnel working again. He paid the power bill, as it was said in Drive to Survive in 2018, and brought new life to the Sauber team and the Sauber family. I think I think it would be a great move for Ferrari to restructure their entire management team and really start to look at this a little bit more seriously. Not to say that they haven't been looking at this seriously. They're obviously an F1 team and they're an F1 for a reason. Um, but I personally see in other championships that Ferrari are part of, like the World Endurance Championship, uh, and other championships that they are involved with, they are so much more organized. They aren't as flustered. Um, and they really look like they know what they're doing. And Frederick is that type of team leader that would be able to really screw everyone's head on right and make sure everything is done properly. Uh, he's a Frenchman, and Ferrari is not unfamiliar with seeing a Frenchman in their team principal role, as they used to have Jean Todt, former F1 CEO or F1 president, I think, uh, as their team principal in the Michael Schumacher days. And we all know how successful Ferrari was when Michael Schumacher was there and Jean Todt was the team principal. So, instead of having this full Italian roster, maybe you could mix and mingle some other countries in there and, really open up your, I guess, diversity into the way that people think, into the way that things are operated. Because right now things aren't working well at Ferrari.
Yeah, no, I think that what Ferrari also sees is that the window is closing a little bit. Charles Leclerc has 2 years left on his contract. Carlos Sainz has 2 years left on his contract. You know, it's similar to many teams who have to kind of go all in and try to win it now. Uh, I'm not saying that Carlos or Charles will definitely walk in 2024 without a championship, but you can't have the year that they had at a consistent rate because that's almost a red flag eventually to drivers. Like we've seen in the past with other sports teams how star players will want to leave if there's nothing right or if nothing correct is going on. So I think eventually, something has to give, and they certainly weren't going to get rid of Charles or Carlos at this point because both have had great years compared to maybe last year or years prior. But you look at the at how this year has kind of went. I think that Ferrari did need a change, and unfortunately, it was Mattia that had to get the raw end of the stick in this case because there's not really much else that you can do.
Well, if you look at it too, you look at it from the driver's perspective, they've done nothing wrong all year. I mean, Charles and Carlos have had fast cars consistently. They've been on pole, they've won races. Uh, and, it's all come down to shoddy strategy and, poor decision making on the pit wall. We even saw it in Brazil this weekend or last weekend. What were they thinking throwing Charles on the intermediates? What were they thinking, pulling him into the pit lane, and scrambling for tires? This is stuff we see, Mercedes do on an off day in Hockenheim. This is consistent stuff we've been seeing from Ferrari. And, other teams only make these mistakes every once in a while. So, I think there's a full management structure that needs to change there, and starting at the top is the best place.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I think that's really enough said on the case because what else can Ferrari do at this point? There's not much. Their hands are kind of tied. They've committed to their future in terms of drivers. I think that Mattia had to go, and it was rumored that he was going to go around the summer break, but I think Ferrari wanted to see if he could maybe rally the team and make a push, and that just didn't happen. And the team made consistent mistakes even after the summer break. So I think it's going to be really exciting to see what this change in management does for the team. And yeah, I think it will be overall just hopefully a better year for Ferrari because I really did enjoy seeing Charles and Max kind of duke it out. And now seeing Lewis and George in the mix, imagine having six cars fighting for first on a consistent basis. That's something we haven't really seen in a very long time.
No, not at all. And I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Moving on to our final piece of news for the day, we have news that Haas is going to announce their driver lineup for 2023 potentially tomorrow or this race weekend. Mark, we've talked about it over and over. It's almost a tiring thing. We're finally getting our answer. And it almost looks as all signs are going towards Nico Hulkenberg making his F1 return. For those of you who don't know, that Nico Hulkenberg is a German driver who has been out of F1 for, I believe, the last 2 to 3 years. He hasn't been active as much. He was a replacement for Sebastian Vettel at the start of the year for Aston Martin, and it was revealed recently that he has left that position, and it's gone to Stoffel Van Dorn, I believe. And now it looks as though Nico Hulkenberg could be making his return, replacing his fellow German driver, Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, I think that this is a move that, Haas has listened to the people, and they want Nico Hulkenberg. Well, the people want Nico Hulkenberg back in the car. Um, Personally, I don't think that this is a good move for Haas. Nico was a driver that was on the last legs of his F1 career when he first left it. And, I don't really think that sitting out for 3 years now because he's sat out since 19. No, he left in 2020, right?
I
Uh,
I think it was 2019.
so yeah, so he sat out 2020, 2021, and 2022. 3 years now. Uh, I don't think that that's necessarily the best option. Yeah, he's had fill-ins. He filled in during the pandemic for Lance Stroll. He's filled in during the pandemic for Sebastian Vettel. But these sporadic, every once in a while F1 drives, doesn't really condition the body to what F1 drivers feel day in, day out, and not even a simulator can do that. So, best move for Haas? Probably not. Will they be looking at scoring consistent points? Probably still not, because even Kevin Magnussen scoring pole this weekend at Brazil, we saw it. He was going down the order so fast. He went from eighth, and he was losing positions on the Grand Prix start really quickly, and then he was eventually taken out by Daniel Ricciardo. But even in the sprint, he only just held on to eighth place. And is it all the drivers' fault? I don't believe so. Mick has been on some good strategies, and they just didn't pan out. He had damage in Suzuka. He had, I don't think he had damage this weekend at Brazil. But would it be better to continue and have some continuity into next year with these new cars? Probably. I think that it would be better to stick with the two drivers you have now than decide to go on with another driver.
Yeah, no, I I 100% agree with that take because I think the key word that you said is continuity, and that's something Haas hasn't had in the last 2 years. They got rid of Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen at the end of 2020. In 2021, they had two rookies in Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher, and okay, they weren't great, they weren't outstanding, but they were two young drivers who could maybe have an impact in the long term. Obviously, with things going on in the world, Nikita Mazepin was cut from his seat, and they had brought in Kevin Magnussen back, which, okay, it's like a 1 year kind of sabbatical type of thing. So there is a bit of continuity there. You guy just took a break for a year, but I think to get rid of Mick Schumacher after 2 years, um, I guess the question is what other talent is on board, and I don't think Nico Hulkenberg is on that same tier as Mick Schumacher because uh, Mick kind of has the side of youth on him because he's still a young driver. He can develop and become a better one, whereas Nico is 35 and his best driving days, like you said, are probably way behind him unless he's able to pull out some Fernando Alonso level stuff, and even that's a stretch. Because there's
Only
only
Fernando can do Fernando.
only there's yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I think it's tough to judge Nico because again he hasn't had a consistent gig since 2019. If this is the case, I look forward to seeing what he does, but I think it's a step back for Haas as a team because when you compare a young driver to an old driver and a guy who has such a much higher ceiling than I think that Nico Hulkenberg ever had, it just it just hurts the team overall. But I'd be curious to see what the reasoning is that they wouldn't bring Mick back.
Did he score points on his F1 stand-in for?
No.
Okay, so he did two races. I'm just looking this up now. He did two races. He did the first and second race, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and he didn't score points in either of those races. Whereas,
Well, Saudi
yeah,
Arabia was
neither of the
the
Aston Martins scored points in those two races.
yeah,
So,
and
yeah,
Saudi Arabia was that iconic race where Kevin Magnussen was fighting with Lewis Hamilton for ninth place. Um,
yes, it
so
was.
I think it shows kind of where Aston Martin was at the time and where Nico Hulkenberg is now. So it's going to be interesting to say the least if they decide to go with him. Again, nothing is set in stone. We're still waiting for our confirmation. I'm sure we're going to get it probably tomorrow or at least by the end of the year. We've talked about where Mick could go. There's not many places left. There's rumors that he might be a Mercedes reserve driver, which is whatever, it's okay. He's been rumored to go to Williams, but Logan Sargent right now has that gig unless he's unable to get his super license. I know, Mark, you said you don't think he's going to get it done, but again, it's F1 is so unpredictable. It's hard to dictate where the sport's going to go. So,
You mentioned Mercedes. It would be nice to see him go to Mercedes. It was the last team that his father was on, and the last team his father scored points with. Um, I think it would personally be nice to see him there, but that's just my 2 cents on it. Uh, we'll see what happens.
yeah, no, I think it's going to be really interesting to see if Mick does go to Mercedes, if they have a plan for him for the future, because Lewis Hamilton, obviously at 37, I know he says he wants to be in F1 for the long term. Don't know if Mercedes wants him in F1 for the long term. I think it depends on, where they are as a team as well. But, it's not far off to think that maybe Mick could replace Lewis when the time is right. That did kind of become a conversation that we had earlier in the year when Lewis was rumored to want to retire at the end of this season. So I think we're just gonna have to see what happens, and obviously the Haas situation will be revealed in a couple of days. And until then, guys, if you've made it this far, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. We appreciate all the support. Don't forget to share with all of your friends. I don't know if I said that already. And we will see you guys in the next video.